I've dealt with all kinds of difficult people in my life. Rude clients, scam contractors, even a guy who once tried to pay me for a landscaping job with expired Applebee's gift cards. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the kind of entitled insanity that rolled into my neighborhood the day the Whitmores moved in next door. See, I live on a corner lot in a quiet little blue-collar neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio, the kind of place where people still wave when they drive by and nobody cares if your lawn isn't perfectly striped every Saturday morning. I bought my house almost 9 years ago after my divorce. Small place, 2 bedrooms, detached garage, nothing fancy. But it had one thing that made my landscaping business possible: a wide gravel driveway that wrapped around the side of the house and gave me enough room for my truck, my trailer, and all my equipment without blocking the street. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, every inch of it. Then came Brent and Vanessa Whitmore. The second they moved in, you could tell they thought they were too good for the neighborhood. They bought the old Miller house for almost double what it was worth, immediately ripped out half the yard, hired contractors every other day, and turned the place into what I can only describe as a Pinterest board with a mortgage. White stone flower beds, black metal accents, imported front door, designer garage lights. The whole "we just discovered modern farmhouse on Instagram" package. And Brent. Man, Brent had this way of talking to people where he smiled with his mouth, but not his eyes, like every conversation was secretly an insult. He drove this giant black Escalade that barely fit in his own driveway, and every chance he got, he'd make little comments about my work trailer sitting beside my garage. Kind of kills the curb appeal. Huh? He said to me once while sipping one of those little green juice drinks like he was auditioning for a Tesla commercial. I laughed it off at first because honestly, guys like him usually just want attention. But then the orange traffic cones showed up. One morning I walked outside with my coffee, and there they were, 3 bright orange cones sitting right on the edge of my driveway near the property line. No note, no explanation, just cones. I moved them back onto his side and figured maybe some contractor left them there. Wrong. That same evening, Brent came marching across the lawn in loafers that probably cost more than my lawnmower tires. He had this fake friendly grin plastered across his face and said, "Hey man, Vanessa and I were thinking maybe we could share this part of the driveway. You've got a ton of extra space, and we've been having guests over a lot lately." I just stared at him for a second because I honestly thought he was joking. Then I said, "It's not shared, Brent. It's my driveway." Simple, respectful, end of conversation. Except his smile disappeared immediately. Just gone. Like somebody flipped a switch. He looked past me toward my trailer, nodded slowly, and said, "Well, we'll see how that plays out." That sentence sat in my head for days because it didn't sound like a neighbor talking. It sounded like a threat. And sure enough, 1 week later, I came home from a landscaping job covered in dirt and sweat, pulled onto my street, and almost slammed on the brakes when I saw what they'd done. There was fresh black asphalt poured over the side section of my driveway, perfectly connecting it to Brent's property like it had always belonged there. And right down the middle of what used to be my access lane sat a brand new decorative cedar fence, 8 feet onto my land. My trailer couldn't even get through anymore. I just sat in my truck staring at it, engine running, trying to process how somebody could be insane enough to literally build on another person's property in broad daylight. So I walked straight to their front door. Vanessa answered, holding a wine glass like she'd been waiting for me all afternoon. I said, "Your husband paved over my driveway and blocked my property with a fence." She didn't even blink. She smirked, actually smirked, and said, "Brent had a survey done. That section belongs to us now. Maybe you should check your paperwork." Then she took a sip of wine while looking at me like she'd already won. That's the thing about arrogant people. They assume confidence is the same thing as being right. So I went inside, dug out my deed, my original survey, every property document from closing day, spread them all across my kitchen table, and checked every line twice. And there it was in black and white. The entire section they claimed was theirs still legally belonged to me. Every inch. Which meant Brent either lied, or he genuinely thought he could bully me into giving up part of my land because he had more money. I called him immediately. The second he picked up, I said, "You need to remove that fence and asphalt now." And this guy actually laughed. Not nervous laughter either, smug laughter. Then he goes, "We upgraded the property line. If you've got a problem with it, call a lawyer." So that's exactly what I did. And while the legal paperwork crawled through the system, Brent Whitmore treated my stolen driveway like his own private VIP parking lot. And that's when I realized something important. If he wanted to play games with my property, I could play too. Now let me pause the story for a second because this is where a lot of people make the same mistake Brent made, and honestly, it happens more often than you'd think. People assume property disputes are all about confidence. Whoever acts the most aggressive somehow wins. But according to standard procedure, none of that tough guy behavior means a damn thing once paperwork enters the room. Property lines are boring, technical, and painfully specific. Counties keep records for a reason. Surveys exist for a reason. And if you ever end up in a dispute with a neighbor, the very first thing that matters is documentation, not attitude. From a legal perspective, Brent already screwed himself the moment he poured asphalt and installed a permanent structure without verified approval, because once you alter somebody else's property, you're not just being annoying anymore. You're creating liability. Big difference. And psychologically, this whole thing was a textbook power move. This is a psychological trap people like Brent use all the time. They push boundaries a little at first, then they watch your reaction. First the traffic cones, then the shared driveway conversation, then the construction. Every step was designed to normalize the takeover little by little, so eventually I'd feel too exhausted to fight it. Entitled people count on social pressure more than actual legality. They assume normal folks don't want drama, don't want court, don't want conflict. And most of the time, they're right. But the second somebody mistakes your patience for weakness, the entire game changes. And trust me, Brent was about to learn that lesson the hard way. For about 2 weeks, Brent acted like he'd conquered territory in some suburban war movie. Every single day I'd wake up and see his Escalade parked on the section of driveway he stole from me. Perfectly centered too, like the guy wanted me to admire it. At night he installed these little solar landscape lights along the edge of the asphalt, and I swear to God, Vanessa stood outside one evening holding a glass of wine, just staring at them like they'd personally rebuilt Rome. Meanwhile, my trailer barely fit through the remaining access lane, and anytime I parked near the fence, Brent would text me complaints about visual clutter hurting property values. That was the moment something in me snapped. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. Because once somebody becomes arrogant enough to believe they can openly steal from you, embarrassing them stops feeling rude and starts feeling necessary. So I got creative. The first move happened on a Tuesday morning around 7 a.m. I had a dump truck scheduled to deliver mulch for a client project later that week. Normally I'd store it behind my garage, but this time I gave the driver very specific instructions. I stood there drinking coffee while 12 cubic yards of dark mulch poured directly onto the exact section Brent claimed was his extended driveway. Huge pile too. Looked like a dirt volcano exploded beside his fence. 10 minutes later, Brent came storming out in a gray bathrobe and loafers, hair sticking up everywhere, absolutely losing his mind. "What the hell are you doing?" he yelled. I looked at the pile, looked back at him and said, "Using my property." The guy turned bright red. "You're blocking our access." And that's when I hit him with the sweetest line I've ever delivered in my life. "No, Brent. I'm blocking access to my driveway." Huge difference. He threatened police, lawsuits, HOA complaints, everything. I just nodded and kept sipping coffee while he spiraled. The mulch pile stayed there for 3 full days because technically, I was busy. Vanessa started leaving passive-aggressive notes taped to my mailbox saying things like, "Neighborhood standards matter," and "Some people take pride in their homes." Meanwhile, every guest they invited over had to park down the street and walk past Mount Mulch like it was some kind of suburban monument to pettiness. But honestly, that was only the warm-up. My second move hit harder. The following Friday, I ordered 10 tons of gravel. Not decorative gravel either. Rough, crushed limestone, the kind contractors use as base foundation material. The delivery driver backed his truck right up to the property line and dumped the entire load across the stolen asphalt section in one glorious avalanche. It completely buried Brent's fake driveway extension under a mountain of gray rock. I'm talking full blockage. No SUV was getting through that unless it had tank tracks. This time Brent called the cops. 2 officers showed up about 20 minutes later while Brent paced around waving his arms like an inflatable car dealership mascot. The second they stepped out, he immediately started talking over everyone. "He's harassing us. He intentionally blocked our driveway. This is retaliation. One of the officers, older guy with tired eyes, asked me calmly if I had proof the land belonged to me. I went inside, grabbed my survey packet, deed paperwork, and property map, then handed everything over. The officer studied it for maybe 30 seconds before slowly turning toward Brent. I will never forget this moment for as long as I live. The officer pointed at the survey and said, "Sir, according to county records, this area belongs to him." Brent immediately goes, "But we improved it." The officer blinked twice and replied, "That's not really how ownership works." I almost laughed right there. Then Brent tried one last desperate argument. "But he's blocking our driveway." And the officer, absolute legend, looked him dead in the eye and said, "Then maybe you shouldn't have built one on somebody else's property." Silence. Pure, beautiful silence. Even Vanessa looked stunned. Now most people probably would have stopped there because technically I was already winning, but after weeks of disrespect, insults, and manipulation, I decided Brent deserved one final reminder about boundaries. So Monday morning, a bright blue porta-potty appeared directly beside the fence line. Oh yeah, commercial construction grade 2, impossible to miss. I rented it for my work cruise, which was technically true if you stretched the definition hard enough. Did I need it there? Absolutely not. Did it become the single funniest object in our entire neighborhood? Without question. Kids riding bikes slowed down to stare at it. Delivery drivers laughed. One old guy walking his dog actually gave me a thumbs up. Meanwhile, Brent looked like he was aging in real time every time he saw it. The best part was the placement, because the porta-potty sat entirely on my property, exactly where the legal survey markers said it could, which meant nobody could do a thing about it. That's when Brent finally snapped for real. About 2 weeks later, I got served court papers. He was suing me for intentional interference, emotional distress, and property damage claims tied to the gravel pile. Emotional distress from a porta-potty. You can't make this stuff up. But here's the problem with arrogant people. They think money automatically equals preparation. The second I got served, my lawyer filed a counterclaim for illegal construction, property encroachment, trespassing, and restoration damages. And unlike Brent, we had actual evidence. Court day finally arrived about 6 weeks later. Brent walked in wearing this expensive navy suit with Vanessa beside him looking furious at the world, while I showed up in work boots and a clean flannel because honestly, I didn't need theater, I needed facts. And facts were about to destroy this man. The judge started by reviewing Brent's complaint first. His attorney tried arguing that the disputed area had become shared functional access space between the properties, which sounded fancy until the judge asked the simplest question imaginable. Do you possess a certified property survey confirming ownership? That's when everything fell apart. Brent confidently handed over what he called his survey. The judge looked down at the paper, frowned, then adjusted his glasses. Turns out Brent hadn't hired a licensed surveyor at all. He literally measured distances himself using a tape measure and drew a rough sketch of the property lines based on landscaping features. I am not kidding. The courtroom actually got quiet. Even his own attorney looked uncomfortable. Then my lawyer presented the real survey, county certified, professionally documented, tied directly to the deed records and original lot registration. We brought in the licensed surveyor too, older guy named Harold who explained property markers so clearly even the judge looked annoyed Brent wasted the court's time. From a legal perspective, Brent was cooked the second that certified survey hit the evidence table. Then came the photos. Oh man, the photos. Pictures of the original driveway before construction. Photos of Brent's fence crossing onto my property. Invoices from the asphalt crew. Security camera footage showing contractors entering my land without permission. By the time the evidence presentation ended, the judge looked genuinely irritated. Then Brent made the biggest mistake of all. He interrupted. He actually stood up and said, "We invested a lot of money improving that section." The judge immediately fired back. Improving somebody else's property without permission is not a legal defense, Mr. Whitmore. Game over. The final ruling came about 15 minutes later. The judge ordered complete removal of the fence and asphalt extension, full restoration of my driveway to its original condition, reimbursement for all legal fees, and additional penalties tied to unauthorized construction. Brent had 30 days to fix everything at his own expense. And buddy, Watching that fence come down was one of the most satisfying experiences of my entire life. The construction crew spent 2 full days ripping out asphalt while Brent stood in his driveway pretending not to notice me. Vanessa stopped making eye contact completely. The little solar lights disappeared overnight. And the porta potty? I left it there 3 extra days after the ruling, just because I could. The craziest part is this whole disaster never had to happen. If Brent had simply respected boundaries from the beginning, we probably would have stayed perfectly normal neighbors. But some people see kindness as weakness, and once they convince themselves the rules don't apply to them, they keep pushing until reality finally pushes back harder. And in Brent's case, reality arrived in the form of gravel piles, legal documents, and one very humiliating portable toilet. You know what's funny about situations like this? People always assume the biggest part of the story is the revenge, the gravel pile, the porta potty, the courtroom humiliation. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, those parts were deeply satisfying. But honestly, that's not the real lesson here. The lesson here is that entitlement almost always starts small. It starts with somebody testing boundaries to see what they can get away with. A traffic cone here, a shared space suggestion there, a little pressure, a little manipulation, a little fake confidence designed to make you second-guess yourself. And if you let those early moments slide because you don't want drama, eventually you wake up staring at a fence built 8 feet onto your property, wondering how things escalated so fast. Because people like Brent don't think in terms of fairness, they think in terms of leverage. This is a psychological trap a lot of decent people fall into. We assume everybody values compromise the same way we do. We think staying calm automatically means the other side will become reasonable too. But sometimes calm people run into aggressive people, and aggressive people interpret patience as permission. That's why boundaries matter so much. Not because you enjoy conflict, but because boundaries are the only thing stopping entitled personalities from consuming more and more space around them. And honestly, HOA neighborhoods make this even worse sometimes. I've seen entire communities turn into quiet little power games where people obsess over control because they're bored, insecure, or desperate to feel important. According to standard procedure, property disputes should always begin with documentation, communication, and legal verification, not emotional escalation. But the reality is, once ego enters the equation, common sense usually leaves the room. From a legal perspective, the biggest mistake Brent made wasn't stealing part of my driveway. It was believing appearance mattered more than evidence. He thought expensive cars, confidence, and intimidation would somehow outweigh county records and certified surveys. That mentality destroys people in court every single day. And look, I'm not saying everybody should respond to bad neighbors with dump trucks and porta potties. Although I'm also not saying it didn't work beautifully in this case. What I am saying is this: if somebody crosses a line, document everything immediately. Save texts. Take photos. Know your property lines. Know your rights. Because once facts are on your side, patience becomes power. The weirdest part? About 4 months after the lawsuit ended, the Whitmores quietly sold the house and moved away. No goodbye, no apology, nothing. One morning the moving trucks showed up, and by the end of the week they were gone. Last I heard, the new owners are actually normal people. We wave at each other, exchange Christmas cookies, basic human behavior. You know, revolutionary stuff. But every now and then when I back my trailer into the driveway, I still glance over at that old fence line and laugh to myself, because somewhere out there is a man who probably gets angry every time he sees a porta potty. And honestly, that thought still makes my day.